You were born into a world that valued silence over screams, obedience over dreams. Your mother barely had time to hold you after birth. Her hands already raw from factory work, her back bent by a system that paid in coins but demanded blood. Your father wasn't around much. He worked 2 jobs and drank through the 3rd shift, the one called life. You never really got to know him, but you knew his absence intimately, like a second skin. It wrapped around your childhood like an old, frayed coat, something you could never outgrow. You were smart, though. Too smart. That was the problem. You saw the cracks in the world long before anyone expected you to. At school, while other kids copied answers, you were figuring out the patterns behind the questions. You saw life for what it was, an exam you didn't ask to take, with rules no one ever explained. But you kept your head down. You learned early that speaking up got you punished. So you played the role, quiet, respectful, invisible. Except when it mattered. In your teens, you found your first love, the piano. A rusty, old, upright, abandoned in a neighbor's yard. It was missing keys, out of tune, but to you, it was a voice, a way to say all the things you weren't allowed to. You played until your fingers bled, until the neighbors complained, until your mother told you to stop wasting time. Still, you played. Music was your rebellion, your escape, your prayer. That's when the idea first bloomed. Maybe you could be more. Maybe you could climb out of this pit. So you studied, worked, sacrificed. You earned a scholarship to a university in Seoul, something no one from your neighborhood ever did. You told your mother on the morning of your departure, expecting pride. She just nodded and said, "Don't forget where you came from." You never did. That was the curse. University was a battlefield of its own. Rich kids in designer coats laughed at your accent, your clothes, your hunger. But you didn't care. You worked twice as hard, slept half as much. You graduated top of your class in classical music performance, your fingers dancing across keys like gods pulling strings. Then reality hit. Jobs didn't line up just because you were talented. The world didn't bend for passion. You played in dingy bars, in half-empty lounges. You taught bratty kids whose parents thought music was just a hobby. You tried to smile through it, but every day chipped a little more away. The dream was slipping. Then came the audition. You saw the flyer posted on a crumbling wall near a subway station. National Piano Competition. Grand prize, 100 million won. Your heart raced. This was it. This was your way out. You practiced until your hands cramped, until you started dreaming in chords. On the day of the competition, you wore your only good suit, the one you used for funerals and job interviews. You played like the world was ending. And for a few minutes, you felt free. You won. The applause was thunder. Cameras flashed. You were a star, briefly. You were offered tours, record deals, interviews. You were invited to perform for elite circles, corporate events, private parties. You wore a tuxedo and smiled for people who had no idea who you were or what it took to stand there. Then came the invitation. A quiet man in a gray suit approached you after a performance. He wasn't part of the press or any label. He said he represented a unique opportunity. He handed you a card with nothing but a circle, a triangle, and a square. You thought it was a joke until he said the words that unlocked the deepest vault in your heart. Your brother is in trouble. You froze. You hadn't spoken to your brother in years. Not since the incident. He went into the police force while you pursued music. You argued constantly. He accused you of being selfish, of abandoning your roots. You called him naive, a fool chasing a broken system. The last time you spoke, you said things you could never take back. But now he was missing, and the man in the suit claimed to know where. So you followed. It began with a ferry ride to nowhere. You were blindfolded, drugged. You awoke in a facility that looked like a child's nightmare stitched together by an architect gone mad. They called it game, but it was war. And you? You became a player. You wore a green tracksuit. You were given a number. You became part of the machine. At first, you thought you could win, like everyone else. But you saw quickly, this wasn't about money. This was a blood ritual for the rich. A pageant of despair dressed as sport. And yet, you played. You survived. You outthought them, outmaneuvered them. You played every game like it was a symphony, every opponent a note to silence. You won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like murder. The prize money was wired to an offshore account. You were told you were free to go, but you couldn't walk away. Not really. The man in the gray suit came again. He offered you a choice. Join us, he said, or return to the poverty that made you. You laughed at first, until he showed you footage of your brother. Surveillance. Wiretaps. Notes. Your brother was looking for you, getting too close to the truth. If he found out, they said he would die. So you made a deal. You disappeared. You became the frontman. They gave you the mask, the black coat, the voice changer. They stripped you of identity, of name. You became a ghost in a theater of death. You managed the games. You designed new horrors. You watched hundreds die every season, their lives ending like punctuation marks at the end of a cruel sentence. And every night, you played the piano in your private suite, alone in silence. That was the only part of you that survived. You told yourself it was to protect your brother. That if you controlled the games, you could steer them away from him. But deep down, you knew the truth. You liked the power. For once, you weren't the desperate artist or the poor kid. You were the god behind the curtain, the master of life and death. The audience clapped when you said so. The contestants danced to your tune. You were everything the world once denied you. Then he came. You knew. He infiltrated the facility, posing as a guard. You knew at the moment you saw his eyes behind the mask. He had your fire, your stubbornness. He didn't know how to quit. He dug through records, filmed everything, sent it out to the world. And he found you. The moment you pointed the gun at him was the moment everything cracked. He begged you to stop. You're my brother, he said. Let's go home. But you couldn't. You didn't even know where home was anymore. You'd burned that bridge the moment you signed your soul to this carnival of corpses. So you shot him. He fell off the cliff and disappeared into the sea. You stood there, heart racing, praying he'd survive, hating yourself for hoping he didn't. It was cleaner that way. No loose ends. But loose ends don't stay tied. The next season was worse. The VIPs wanted more blood, more spectacle. You obeyed, like a dog wearing crown. You tried to convince yourself that you were doing it for the greater good, that you could dismantle the system from within. But you weren't dismantling anything. You were just another cog, painted black instead of red. You aged rapidly. Your hair grayed. Your eyes dulled. You started drinking alone. You stared at the sea often, remembering the splash your brother made as he vanished. You wondered if he forgave you, if he even could. Then, one night, you received a message. It wasn't from the VIPs or the staff. It was handwritten, simple, just a single phrase. I'm still alive. You knew it was him. Something inside you cracked. Not like a fracture, but like a floodgate. The piano stopped sounding sweet. The games felt like purgatory. You started making mistakes, letting players win who shouldn't, quietly sabotaging the VIP's desires. You became a liability. They noticed. You heard whispers. Replacement. Retirement. Disposal. That's what they called it when someone knew too much. You were no longer the ghost. You were the hunted. So you ran. Not physically. Not yet. But in your mind. You stopped obeying orders. You sent messages to outsiders. You tried to leak footage quietly. You even left a clue in the final round. A puzzle only your brother could solve, if he was watching. But it was too late. They came during the Winter Games. Masked men. Silent. Efficient. You tried to fight. You killed 2 of them. But the third was faster. A syringe in your neck. Darkness. You woke up strapped to a bed in the observation chamber. Wires in your arms. Monitors blinking like heartbeats. You weren't the frontman anymore. Just another test subject. They wanted to study your brain. To understand loyalty, rebellion, guilt. They said your emotional spectrum was anomalous. Useful for future algorithms. You didn't scream. You just stared at the ceiling and waited. But fate, if such a thing exists, intervened. An explosion rocked the compound. Sirens. Screams. Fire. A breach. Someone had infiltrated. You were left unattended for 10 seconds. It was enough. You pulled the tubes out, broke the restraints, escaped through a vent. You staggered through flames, coughing, bleeding. You found the piano room again, half-burned but intact. You sat one last time, played a single chord. Then you walked outside, into the freezing air, to the cliff's edge where you once shot your brother. And he was there. Yun-Hook. Older. Scarred. Alive. He didn't speak. Neither did you. He raised his gun. You nodded. Do it, you whispered. But he didn't. He lowered the weapon, tears in his eyes. You're still my brother, he said. Even after everything. You collapsed to your knees. And there, on that cliff, as the sun rose and the compound burned behind you, you died. Not from bullets or blood loss, but from the weight of it all. And for the first time in decades, you felt peace. Because someone, somewhere, still remembered who you were before the mask. Before